Welcome in, welcome in. As I promised my patrons, I am doing the duckling as well. I did the parrot live on Friday, and so this week I am going to release this for my patrons and for everybody, but my patrons asked to do the duckling as well as the parrot. It was kind of a tie vote, so duckling and parrot. I did the parrot live, and I'm going to show you how I did the duckling. Now on this eye, the first thing that I did was I had colored in the pupil with a black, carbon black. Then I went around the pupil with a nice reddish brown, and then I lightened up one corner of that with a lighter beige color. I put a blue highlight right at the top, and then right in the center of that I put a white highlight. And now I'm just going around the edge of the eye with a dark, either you can go with indigo or you can go with a black just to line that eye. Now I've got a nice deep blue, and I'm just going over all of the brown markings. I'm just blocking everything in, just getting where I want my darks to go. I don't want it to be, even though it's brown, his stripes, his little markings on his face, he's such a sweet little duck, are brown. I want to have some undertones of blue in there. Now I'm taking a deep, really warm yellow and going into where the yellow parts of his little face are, and I am using a hard pastel for this one. Well, it's really a semi-hard. I don't have any really hard pastels other than my pastel pencils. Now I do want to point something out. You can see how I sketched the duckling onto my Canson Me Tints paper. That's what this is. This is Me Tints paper, and it's sort of a bluish gray color. But you can see where I sketched it on, and I left little kind of ruts, little gutters, and it's standing out because the pastel's not going down into those little white marks that I made because they're a little deep. So whenever you are sketching your subject on there, make sure that you use a light hand. Don't do like I do and make dents in the paper, because as you can see, they're kind of standing out. Now it's going to be okay because I'm going to blend into it and all that before it's over with. I just wanted to point that out because that's a good learning, a good learning moment. I did something that I don't want you to do, so I'm pointing it out. And just don't worry, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody does, everybody does mistakes. It's okay. But I want to point mine out so that maybe you can avoid that mistake. Now I'm just blending those colors together, using my fingers and just softening that up. I went and got a cotton swab and blending in that really small area, trying to keep it into, just trying to keep it in the area where I want it. I don't want it blended out too much. Now some of that brown got on my yellow, so I'm just taking my kneaded eraser. I love kneaded erasers. I highly recommend getting all the kneaded erasers you can get because I use them for everything. I use them for watercolor. I use them for pastels. I use them for when I draw with graphite, and they are just indispensable for me. Now I'm taking some of a bright magenta and going into those brown marks, just sort of warming them up. Into the brown markings. And then over that, I'm taking my dark brown, kind of a burnt umber, and I'm going over that and just blending it a little bit. Now I am going with a lighter yellow over that dark, warm yellow and just putting in some highlights, just lightening it up where I'm layering the colors. The only problem I have with the Me Tints paper is I fill up the tooth really quickly because I like to layer my pastels. I really work better on sanded pastel paper, but since I know a lot of people can afford the Me Tints more than the sanded, that's why I went ahead and used the less expensive Me Tints for my example. Now I'm going in with like a really light orange, sort of a yellow orange, and getting in some of the shadows in those areas. I went ahead and switched over to a really pale, almost cream color to get the highlights in. So I'm trying to get those three different tones in there, a really nice highlight, a mid-tone, and then the shadow. And I'm just just scribbling. I'm just scribbling, just making marks on top of each other, letting the pastel sort of blend those colors together with the end of the pastel. I'm not getting too precise with it. I think I like to paint more in an impressionistic style when I use pastels. Now I've switched to a complete white, and I'm just really going to where I want it to be really light. And now I'm just using a patting motion. I'm patting my finger against the paper, against the pastel, because I don't want to lose the texture. I just want to soften it a little bit and blend it just ever so slightly. Now I've switched over to a black pencil, pastel pencil, and I am shaded in that upper eyelid and around the beak. Now I'm going with sort of a reddish brown and going back into those brown areas, and that gives it a little bit more life. And then right under his chin, he's got a little bit of a reddish brown shadow. So I'm just going to go ahead and block that in as well. And I'm going to add some of that deeper brown just right under his little chin. And I might add a little bit more to his markings on his head with that really darker brown. Add a little bit of the darker blue to really just put in the really darker shadows. Now I've switched over to my semi-hard pastel, and it's sort of a deep warm yellow color. I don't remember. Now if you're a member of my Patreon, you'll get the exact color list with the outline drawing and all of that. If you are at least at the $5 level, which are my dabblers, you'll get all of that in my Patreon. All my patrons that are dabblers and above, they get, for almost all of my little projects, they get the supply list, they get the outline drawing, they get a reference photo, and sometimes I add tips in there if I think it's something that would help them. So yeah, you might want to consider joining, being part of my Patreon family. Now I'm just going to scoot this back so you can see, and all I'm doing is taking a mid-tone of that yellow, kind of a warm yellow, and I'm just making strokes, and that's just his little fluffy feathers that are going down on his chest. And he's got a little backlighting there down the back side. Now I'm going with a creamy color on top of that, and I'm just actually using the tip of the pastel to blend all of these colors together by just kind of pressing down and pulling down. You want to make sure that your strokes go in the same direction that his little feathers are laying across his chest. Now I'm taking my pinky finger and blending out that shadow some. I like to use, for blending, if I'm doing light blending, I use my ring finger or my pinky finger, because those are your two weakest fingers generally for most people. Those are your two weakest fingers, and you'll get better control, and you won't end up wiping off your pastel all together. Like if you use your pointer finger, I generally use that one if I'm wanting to do some really deep shading or deep smudging, and I want to remove just a little bit of that, pastel off the paper. Then I use my pointer finger. When I'm doing a more delicate smudging and blending, I use my ring finger and my pinky finger. Now I'm taking the white, I'm just adding some highlights on here, and I'm just layering it. As you can see, I also put some of that dark blue under his little chest and across his back, and that is just to, where the shadows are, where his little tummy starts to go under him. I'm back with that golden yellow and going over all of those areas where he has a little bit more of a darker part. I'm going to take some more of that reddish brown. It looks like it is a sienna, but that is not the color of that piece of pastel. It's some sort of red, but I can't remember the name of it. But if you have burnt sienna or raw sienna, some kind of a sienna color, that would work as well. Just a reddish brown color. And I'm just kind of peppering that with some of those brown marks, and that just gives it a little bit more definition, a little bit more texture on those feathers. I went and got my darker brown, and I am just adding in some of those deep shadow. Then I switched over, got my hard pastel, semi-hard pastel, and I'm just doing more shadow work in the yellow areas with that really deep golden color. I accidentally, I'm smudging my painting, so I just used my kneaded eraser to get some of that off. Now I'm using a sky blue, or it might be, yeah, that's sky blue, and I'm just doing a highlight across his beak. And then I went and got a magenta type pencil, and I am just coloring in those undertones of magenta onto his beak. And I'm trying to follow. Every time you see me stop, I'm looking at the reference photo. Anytime you're painting or drawing, you want to look at your reference photo or whatever your reference is more than you're actually looking at your painting. That way you see everything that you need to see, and you stay on track of what you're going to do. Then I went with a deeper magenta right there on the crease where his upper and bottom bill meets, and then I'm coming back in with a yellow orange pencil and adding some highlights right along the edges there. And remember, your pencils are also considered to be hard pastels. They're really good for fine details. If you're a beginner, I highly suggest getting pastel pencils. A lot of people like the Pitt pastels. I have these. They work fine for me, but you might want to research which ones you like the best. But these work really well for me. I love my pastels. But the pencils, now I'm just adding a little bit of a mid-tone blue over that purple, and I'm using the tip of the pencil to blend that purple and blue together so it's more of a deep violet in some of the places. And then I went and got a nice pale beige color, and I'm just adding some highlight, and then coming back with the darker maroon color right there on the edge, and then a little bit of an orange on the bottom part of his beak, his underbeak. It's more orange than the top part. The top part is actually, like, if you were going to pick a color, it would be black, but we're not going to use black on his bill because it'd be too strong, in my opinion. And I just think that adding some color just looks a lot better. Plus, in the reference photo, it looks more purpley blue than it does black. But in reality, people would say it was black. But that's the good part of being an artist. You can use your artist license and you can paint it whatever color you want. So I'm just keeping on, just trying to follow the shapes. I'm looking at the shapes that are on the beak, the color of the shapes, where those shapes are positioned, and just trying to mimic that, pretty closely. It doesn't have to be exactly. You are not a copy machine. You are not a Xerox. Do they still have Xerox machine? You are not a copier. You are an artist, so you don't have to follow it exactly. You can use your own instincts in getting those highlights in. Now I've just got a really pale color, and I was going around his nostril. Now I'm taking some pure white, a pure white pencil, and I'm just sort of blending it into some of those oranges just to lighten it up and give it a little bit of a highlight. Going ahead and lightening up that blue with my white, and just doing really light pressure as I go across the darker blue to lighten it up. I don't want to make it too light, but I just want to blend it a little bit with the tip of my pencil. Now I went and got a deeper brown, and I'm adding some shadows to that bottom part of his beak, in his little nostril, and around the edges of that upper part of his beak. I've got some blue that I'm darkening that up with. And I like how his little beak is coming out. It looks pretty good. And I'm just going in with the white again, lightening up some more of the area. And right on the little tip of his beak, he needed a little bit of a white. And I'm going back to that magenta, browny magenta, and a little bit more of a white highlight to his eye. It needed to be a little bit brighter. A few little highlights right on the bottom lid of his eye and right toward the corner, and that just brightens it up, brings him to life a little bit more. And just adding a few little, strokes here and there, taking a little bit of that deeper orange and going inside of his nostril, and then taking a black, or you can take a indigo or really deep brown and just putting that nostril in there, the shadows on it. Now I'm just taking that deeper yellow and I just touched around the edge of his eye. Now I'm going to work on the background. I went with my darkest blue that I have in my set, and I'm just sort of going around the edges of my little duckling. And then as I go over his head though, I want to use a little bit lighter of a blue and just blend it together. And I'm going a little bit heavy with the application because I want this to be a smooth blend behind him. Now you can see that I am changing to my lighter blue as I go around his head to the lighter side. And now I'm doing a smalt blue. That's the name of that color, smalt blue. I've never heard of smalt blue, but there it is. And just sort of outline that a little bit. And then I'm just going to blend it all together once I get, what I think is enough. And you see I want it to be a hard blend. I want it to really blend together smoothly. So I'm using my pointer finger because that is a stronger finger and it will get those pastels blended more evenly. I'm not looking for texture to get texture. I want it to be smooth, so I'm using my stronger finger. And that's just a tip for you. You can test it out when you do your own pastels. It's just how I do it, and it's just how I keep myself in line and try to remember that my pointer finger is strong, so it's going to give me a really smoother blend. It's really going to get those pastels smooshed together. That's a technical pastel term, smooshed together. So we are just layering a little bit more, and I'm just blending that. I really like how that blue, that darker blue, is making my little duckling pop. I think he looks really pretty. And I'm putting a little bit of that blue from my fingers down into the shadows on his chest, just to keep him sort of unified with the background. I'm using some of that blue, and I use some of that darker blue in the brown spots on his head, the brown markings. I'm just trying to darken that up right around the beak so his beak will stand out a little bit better, and then lightening that up because I got it going a little bit dark. So I'm just taking my white pencil and just lightening that up some to separate it from the background. And I'm just adding a little bit of a creamy orangey color, giving him some little wispy feathers that are sticking out from the back. We're getting close to being finished with my little buddy. I think his name is Daphne, or her name is Daphne. That's what I'm going to call this. This is my Daphne, not Daffy, Daphne, like Daphne Duck. That's what her little name is going to be. She might be a boy, but we naming her Daphne. I don't know. I can't tell boy ducklings from girl ducklings, so Daphne it is. And we're just highlighting some of those little feathers and making her look a little bit more fuzzy. It gives it a little bit of texture. I'm putting more in the areas that I want to be highlighted. And we're just going back over that background. We lost a little bit of the fuzziness when we put our background in, so we're just adding that back with a creamy colored pastel and adding some more highlights right across his little chest, across his little chin, his little beak. I mean, not his beak, his little cheek. And you see, it's just, it's not scary. It's just marks. You're just making a bunch of marks. It's not anything that is complicated. You just have to really look at your reference photo and just see where the shapes are and where the shadows are. And that is the most important, is if you get the values right. It doesn't matter what color you use as long as it's the right value. And if you don't know what value is just the lightness or darkness of a color. And that is what gives everything form, is the different values in a subject. The different lightnesses and darknesses, the highlights, the shadows, the midtones. That's what actually gives it form. You could paint this duckling in a magenta color, but as long as you use the correct values, it would still look like a duckling. So that's the main thing that you want to think about, is lightness and darkness. The colors, you can substitute any colors out just as long as they're in the same value range. So now I'm just adding some of that darker brown and just sort of carving out some little shadows here and there. And also adding a little texture, making him making our little Daphne look a little fuzzy. We want a fuzzy duck. He's so fluffy. He's just a fluffy thing. Now I'm taking a nice warm yellow orange and going in there and coming back and getting some of those shadows back in there, because I lost a few when I was getting a little bit happy with that cream color. So we're going to put them back in. And taking some of my really light white and making sure I'm hitting the lightest highlights with that. And you can see that the tooth of my paper is starting to get filled because it's not accepting much more pastel. It is almost to its limit. So now I'm just adding some of this warmer yellow down here in his chest to warm him up some. He was looking a little peaked down there. He needed a little bit of warmth. It was getting too cool, the color was. So I'm just adding a little warmth with that orangey yellow. And I don't like some of this area, so I'm just coming back in. I am going ahead and erasing some of this around that I don't like. I'm picking up some of that excess pastel, and I'm taking my bristle brush and brushing it off. I just don't like the areas there, so I'm going to redo some of that. Again, I like it when I make mistakes. Not really mistakes, but when I change my mind, so that you can see that everybody doesn't just go from start to finish and they never make a mistake and they never change anything. So I brushed that off. I got some of that excess pastel off. I went and got a really pale, almost it's like a cream color, really pale yellowy cream color, and I'm coming back in and I'm painting in some better highlights. I think I lost some of the highlights as I was doing it the first time. I did not like that. I didn't like how it was blending too close to that dark blue in the background, so I just went and added a little bit of highlights with some really pale yellow, and I'm coming back in with that magenta, that sort of reddish purpley brown color, and just adding the shadows, some deeper shadows, and just coming right out on the edge there. And that looks much better to me, so I'm glad that I decided I was going to do something different. Now I'm taking that pale blue and going across and just blending that, and then getting my deeper darker blue and adding some shadows to this darker spots on his little face, his little markings. And I just add some shadow, and it also just gives it a little bit of life. Instead of just doing everything in 3 tones of brown, it looks really nice when you add a little bit of magenta into your brown, a little bit of blue, a little bit of purple. Those colors always look nice together. Now I'm coming in with my golden yellow, and I'm just going to redo this back half. I didn't like how the back half of him was coming out, so I'm just going to add some more in there, just add some more shadows. And it really just gives him some more life, I think. Now I'm coming over with my lighter cream color and blending that out, fluffing that out, just doing nice little marks with the edge of my pastel so that he looks like he's got little fuzzy feathers sticking out from his little head and down his back. And then I've changed to my brown pencil, and I'm just going to darken up this shadow right under his cheek, and just sort of define that a little better, making it a little bit darker, but I'm still letting it look a little fuzzy too. So I'm not completely angling that off or making it a straight line. Now I am just taking my white pastel. He has a big highlight right here, right under his beak. So I'm just taking my white, putting that right back over. And I forgot to film it, but I also went back and fixed that blue background right around his beak where I had erased it. I smoothed that back out. But I forgot to film it, so I'm just letting you know that I did do that. It looks fine like this, but if you look at it close up, you can see where I erased some of the blue. But I did go back and put that darker blue back in there and just smeared it out with my finger so that it blended in well. Now I'm just adding white highlights here and there. and just trying to not get rid of my beautiful yellow, that deep golden yellow. And I'm just taking my white, going and adding some more highlights to his little beak, especially right across the top where the light is hitting it the strongest, and then down the sides, and then he's got a little bit right at the tip of his beak. And I lost some of the highlights around his eyes, so I'm just reapplying those, taking a little bit of a gray and just lightening up that bottom eyelid, and just a little bit more highlights right under there. And we are finished. I'm pretty sure we are close to finished, if not finished. I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching, and a shout out to all my patrons. I love you guys. Until next time, I'll see you later.